Governor Kasich goes to the mat for Medicaid expansion.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Mark Niquette, Columbus correspondent for Bloomberg News. Daryl Rowland, public affairs editor for the Columbus Dispatch. Terry Casey, Republican strategist. And Sam Gresham of Common Cause, Ohio.
It was the biggest show to hit Lima since Glee. And like the fictional TV high school drama based in Lima, there was tension in the auditorium. Governor Kasich said the state of Ohio is one of robust recovery, and he urged lawmakers not to be afraid of big ideas.
We must embrace them. Oh, yeah, let's debate them. And that's the fun part of being in the government. Debate them without the personal attacks. Debate them on the merits. But embrace them, because at the end of the day, big ideas, it will renew us. It will restore our youth. It will give us excitement.
Ideas the governor wants lawmakers, particularly conservative Republican lawmakers, to embrace is a major component of President Obama's health care law. Kasich strongly pushed for an expansion of Medicaid, which would bring $13 billion federal dollars to Ohio.
I know that Medicaid and Medicare have to be transformed. There's no question. And transformed in some ways along the lines of what we have done with Medicaid in the state of Ohio. And when the federal government finally figures out how to begin to solve the problems of Medicare and Medicaid, we will be ready to navigate those changes. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for answers, we should not shoot ourselves in the foot and send our tax dollars to another state to be spent. It is not fair to the taxpayers of the state of Ohio, plain and simple, because if we don't do what we should do on Medicaid, they'll be spending it in California.
Daryl Rowland, is that argument going to work with the Tea Party folks who hate any part of Obamacare?
It won't work with some. No matter what he says, it won't work with some. This will be an area of his budget that may need Democratic support. But that fiscal appeal, I think, is out there for Republicans. I mean, that's the Republican side. He also made a strong appeal. I thought that the highlight of the speech was appealing from an emotional basis to the human nature of people. I copied it just so I could read it here. For those who live in the shadows of life, those who are the least among us, I will not accept the fact that the most vulnerable in our state should be ignored. We could help them. Sounds like a liberal Democrat saying that.
It really did.
And one of the things that certainly the conservatives, as much as they hate Obamacare, they also want what the governor wants to do in terms of cuts to income tax. And if you don't have that money out of Medicaid, it's hard to make as big a cuts in the income tax as what the governor wants to do.
I think that's one of the things about this budget. I applaud the governor for what he's doing. I think the expansion of Medicare is very important, and I think it shows another side of him. I think what is interesting, the absolute power of absolute control, is that it always ends up in a war. Whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, it always ends up in a war. And I think the math on this budget, if you sit down and try and talk about it, we're going to add over here, we're going to take over here, but it all balances out. And somehow they call it a tax cut. I'm a little lost on that. It seems like there's a lot of fees.
We'll get to the tax in a moment. But, Mark, the war that Sam talks about seems to be more in the Republican Party right now over Medicaid than Democrats versus Republicans here.
Yeah, and it's an interesting fight inside the Republican caucus, sort of between compassionate conservative, kind of like Daryl was saying, with the idea that we have to help these people who are in need, and also some argument that this could help hospitals and, as the governor said, be fiscally good for the state, but also the fiscal conservative side, because there's plenty of Republicans who think the federal government just can't pay for this, they won't live up to their obligations, or that it's just a bad idea morally to incur more debt for this entitlement.
And the conservatives are right not to trust the national government, because lots of times they've done the shell game. We'll promise you this, and if you don't like it, you can withdraw. But I have this little prediction that between a Speaker Boehner and a Pat Tiberi, who's in powerful position on Ways and Means, they might write some things in the federal law that helps protect states like Ohio. And one of the key developments this week, conservative Republican governor in Florida, conservative governor in Arizona, a number of other states, New Mexico, Michigan, they've all come out and said, we don't like Obamacare, but this makes sense for our state to protect our taxpayers.
It's a powerful train, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But the Tea Parties are upset, and they're promising a primary opponent for any Republican lawmaker in Ohio who votes for this Medicaid expansion. And take a look at the website graphic that they are using against their governor from their party. This is from the OhioLibertyCoalition.org, the Tea Party organization in Ohio. John Kasich loves bigger government. Darrell, how serious is this threat to GOP lawmakers?
Well, they did the math in various districts showing, we're not talking about a general election here. We're going to get you in the Republican primary. So the numbers are a lot smaller to get to that, and then we just need 51% or 50% plus one of the vote. So it doesn't require that much in a primary, even if you just can turn 10, 20% of the vote. I think for sure it's a threat. I think that's why you're seeing the response you are.
Does that play out in the House and the Senate, having lawmakers say, we don't want this?
Well, the only difference is there's a lot of members from rural districts, and those would be the hospitals hurt the most if you don't have this funding, because some of the big city hospitals can better survive, but a lot of your small and medium-sized counties where Republican legislators are at, they're going to be hearing from their doctors, their other providers, that if you don't do this, it's going to really make their finances bad.
I think the beauty of this is the jerry-rigged districts, those gourmet districts that re-elect Republicans, may be a trap, and it may kill a lot of moderate Republicans.
So who suffers then, Sam, if that happens?
I think the whole country suffers, because I think we need moderate Republicans to get compromised and move across the table. But I think be careful for what you ask for. You have these districts that'll let you be primaried in, then you get crazy people in the general, and then they lose.
So the Republicans would argue that's what we need to balance the budget, to get rid of this spending, to really have solid entitlement reform.
That would make sense if you hadn't only lost 5 of the 6 last major elections, and obviously nobody is buying that. So therefore, you're going to become a minor party if you don't wake up.
There's been talk of separating the Medicaid expansion away from the budget. Some people think that might happen. Some people think it won't. It seems to me that if you separate it from the budget, that's harder for the governor to pass, because they can say, look, I had to vote for the Medicaid expansion to get the income tax cuts. So will it be separated?
Well, I'm sure the Kasich people don't want to separate, because going into that budget, there was talk, even before we knew the details, he really wanted to intertwine everything. So if you took out a major provision, the whole thing comes crashing down. That's why with, income tax and sales tax rate cuts, sales tax base expansion, little Medicaid stuff, severance taxes that we're going to talk about in a moment. He tries to make it as a whole quilt that you can't easily, anyhow, pull anything loose. Now, but there will be attempts to do that, I'm sure.
But the reality is it is intertwined, because there's a lot of the Medicaid savings. There's some things that the governor and his people have done in terms of prisoners, other low-income people that need other help. And if you don't have those tied together, you can't make the whole budget balance. You just can't do one thing and then do the other. They've got to work together.
Well, this budget goes up by what, $8 billion over 2 years over the previous 2-year budget. Almost all of that, or at least a large part of that, is federal money, and a large part of that is through Medicaid.
Well, wait a minute now. I thought that we weren't going to rely on federal money to balance the state budget. Did I hear that somewhere else, Terry? Where did I hear that? I can't remember now.
But it's the Medicaid portion of it. Okay. And yes, we're on a...
You can't take the tag off it. It's still federal money.
No, it's actually our tax money and our debt of our children and grandchildren.
You look at the check it's written on.
All right. Let's get to the other topic. The other thing lawmakers are balking at is the expansion of taxes, the expansion of sales taxes to include scores of services and a new tax. This is not a tax hike, but a tax modernization of gas and oil drillers.
I know many of you are concerned about that. Since we started talking about it, I think the amount of money invested in our state, in our reserves, to capture our reserves, is about $4 billion. People are coming here. State of North Dakota has a severance tax of 8 or 9%. They're exploding. They can't even find enough workers out there. The problem is oil companies only pay 2 dimes of tax, 20 cents, on a $90 barrel of oil. It's not sustainable. And I want us to think about that.
Of course, all of these new taxes will be more than offset by the governor's planned cuts to the state income tax, small business tax, and an overall cut in the state sales tax. Terry Casey, which is a harder sell, the expansion of the sales tax on services or Medicaid expansion?
Well, they both are challenging, and the governor was real clear in the State of the State message that he likes to think big. He doesn't want to be a caretaker governor, and there's a lot of people like Brett Larkin in Cleveland who've applauded him for finally having a governor that wants to take on some of these things, because a lot of states, a lot of economists will tell you the future growth is in services, and if you don't tax them and just rely on goods, it's not going to work long-term economically for Ohio.
But the lobbyists are out. I understand the coin-operated laundry lobbyists are out trying to get out of that sales tax.
My barber and beautician friends are in an uproar. I think we'll have a demonstration out in front of the state capitol within a week. I just think it's beautiful, though. If you look at it, Kasich looks like a moderate among the crazies that exist in the Republican Party. I just think that's beautiful. And I support his tax on fracking. I do. I know you don't want to call it that. Nobody wants to call it. But fracking, yes.
Well, Sam, we're going to have to make a TV commercial out of the good things you said about the governor today.
I mean, I like everything he's doing.
Good.
Get to the fracking tax, Mark. The governor's sticking to his guns on this. He proposed it almost a year ago now, it seems. And he's not giving up, even though it's taking a lot of resistance from conservative areas of the state.
Yeah, I mean, he makes a pretty compelling case, too. I think that, this tax was passed, I think, in the 70s when, no one was envisioning fracking that we have today, the kind of activity. And the argument that if we're going to have this kind of activity, there should be a reasonable payment to, to compensate for the loss of the mineral resources. What's going to be interesting is the fight over, is it best to apply that income to an income tax cut or to pay for more regulators perhaps in the industry? There'll be a fight, I think, about how should we use those proceeds.
Local governments want that money used to improve roads in the areas. They're going to get a lot more traffic with trucks and drilling equipment and things like that.
And on the sales tax, part of what's confusing, like right now today, satellite TV is subject to sales tax, but not cable TV. Right now, and for a long time, magazines have been subject to the sales tax, but not our local newspapers. So there's a lot of disparities. And then, of course, the governor taking on lawyers and lobbyists who would now be subject to the sales tax. With a lot of the real public, that's a popular thing to make them pay their share.
If he would take a recommendation from me, I would say that he should take 80% of this money and put it on the side to be prepared to deal with the environmental issues as a result of fracking and how we're going to rescue these communities and recover our natural water sources. I would highly recommend that he does that.
Darrell, how powerful is the gas lobby in preventing this from being part of the budget?
I think it's a pretty powerful lobby. Again, it's interesting. Here is the Republican governor, when he chooses to make a case for a tax increase, does it very compellingly. You Democrats need to put some of this in amber and hold it aside, because that and Medicaid, it's about as it's about as good as it comes here.
Center left as you can get.
But I think that part of this is going to depend on tactics too, and it's going to be an interesting dance between public pressure, talking to legislatures, working behind the scenes. The governor was very eloquent in his speech, talking about we need to end this partisanship. People want results. We've heard that a lot about Washington. The clip we played earlier about the fun part about being in government, debate these big ideas without the personal attack, debate on the merits. Yet at the same time, within a couple of days of that speech, his people are calling us for one and using in very crude terms, having sex with your mother, to refer to his opponents and people who are writing stories that they don't like. So if that's going to be the tactic, the nice guy and bad behind, I don't know if that's going to fly.
And remember, part of what the governor's proposing is about a 20% cut in the state income tax. As we get closer to April 15th and people are filling that out, that actually adds up to real money for people all over Ohio.
Let's get to another contentious issue. Mayor Mike Coleman gave his State of the City address this week. The city, he said, is in good shape. The schools, he said, they need some work. As Coleman took the stage on the south side of Columbus, tension is rising over the future control of the Columbus City schools. The mayor has appointed a commission which will give recommendations, but the school board still runs the schools, and it does not seem ready to give up control. Coleman called for everyone to come together.
This goal requires significant changes in how we educate our kids, and it will not be easy. Big cities around the nation, including Columbus, have struggled to make the changes needed for quality education. Financial, demographic, labor, administrative, and political challenges have stood in the way of change. There are more pulls and tugs in education than in the Roman Senate at the time of Caesar. But hear me out. Change means doing things differently. And that brings both fear and hope. And I believe that hope is stronger than fear.
Darrell, and to me, the surprise is not that there is tension over this future control of the school board, is that it took so long to really bubble to the surface.
Well, my opinion is that this bubbled to the surface when business leaders and other community leaders, and political leaders, including the mayor, saw that this was not just an issue of quote-unquote incompetence, perhaps, of city school people, but now we're talking about possible criminal activity in the scrubbing scandal that my colleagues at the Dispatch broke. I think that, that was a tipping point, I think. It's like, all right, it's time. We're just going to not take this anymore. We're going to step in. I remember when Michael Coleman first ran for mayor, he was talking about education. It was like almost like a token thing. What does the mayor have to do with education? Who knows? He may be. Again, be careful what you wish for. Does he want to run these schools?
But as of
do we
right
want him
now,
to run the schools?
As of right now, though, legally, not politically, but legally, that commission, the mayor's commission, has as much authority over the school board as we do right here.
But what puzzles me is 12 of Columbus public schools are considered by USA Today as best schools in the country. The mayor and the superintendent was a Superintendent of the Year in 2012. Some of its middle schools are considered models for middle schools. It's immersion school, it's Spanish immersion schools, it's physical education school. I think the mayor tipped what the corporate people are interested in. And in my portion of the community and the people I go with, it's that $1.8 billion that is the budget. It is at 240 buildings, and it's the more than 6,500 employees. They are more interested in that because if you juxtapose the Columbus Public Schools against any other urban schools in this state or in this country, they are good.
I think this data scandal has really raised some serious questions about the district, and as you heard in that clip, Mayor Coleman is not the first mayor, and he won't be the last mayor to realize that the success of your city is going to depend in large part on the education system beyond whatever you try to do as mayor.
And I want to give the mayor kudos. I mean, he almost sounded like John Kasich saying change is tough, but if we don't do it, it's going to get a lot worse. But you think of it, for 48,000 students to spend over $1 billion, the Columbus schools have the money, but the results are not good, and it's hurting our community.
Where were you 10 years ago? Where were you 15 years ago? Where were you when I was struggling with the Columbus Public Schools 10, 15 years ago? Where were you then?
I've long been of view that they need to do it better, and they failed.
Why is it going to change now? I mean, they say this isn't a corporate takeover. They say there's no lobbying going on at the State House to change state laws. What they say. They're going to have recommendations in April. The school board can say, thanks very much, but we're going to do it our way. And unless they really go to the mat, that's what's going to happen.
Well, but I think there's some people really fed up because, again, they've got the money. The money hasn't been spent very well. But in the past decade or so, whether it's Cleveland in Ohio, other cities, they've looked at alternative ways of governance.
You don't want to use Cleveland as a model. I assure you don't want to use Cleveland as a model because it hasn't made any improvements. I think you are right about one thing. This is going to bubble up. And I tell the business leaders, and I will tell the mayor, be careful of what you ask for, because in the backdrop of this is 60-some thousand students whose parents really care about them. So I would suggest to them that they be very careful.
One thing he was specific on, Mark, was that he was specific in his State of the City address on charter schools. He wants a larger role for charter schools. He wants to recruit, he said, good charter schools. It seems like they're here to stay, and if the mayor is endorsing that, that's the Cleveland plan, the charter schools.
Yeah, and it's sort of not your traditional Democratic plan, right? Yeah. But I think you're right. I think there's a recognition there, or at least an acknowledgement that if you're going to have charter as part of the mix.
And part of it is empowering the parents more and saying, I mean, I think one of the big problems besides Jean Harris, and I've said it before, she's got big legal problems on the horizon, but it's the whole bureaucracy of the school system. They're indifferent to really the students and the parents. They're all about their jobs, their salaries, their powers, and they've forgotten why they're there.
I think we have reached that tipping point this year where the frustrations have just boiled over. Now, again, we need to recognize special burdens that urban districts, including Columbus, face within very, very diverse, a lot of ESL students, in their student body. So those challenges, but all the key supporters, many of the key supporters in this community, people who you need to endorse and fund a levy, they want change. They want substantive change.
But we've won levies without those people's support, and they've never really been a friend of the Columbus Public Schools. They've always been detractors and dictators. They've never gone into the schools and embraced the kids. Now, two fundamental issues they're going to play with this thing. You can't make the disparities go away and increase the educational achievement. You have to deal with the disparities that create the disproportional inequality in the educational school. You can't do that. And we've never had anything good from corporate America that made public schools better. I'm sorry.
Well, this story is not going to go away as the superintendent search and the commission's work continues. Our last topic, now we all know the story about unmanned remote-controlled drones. They're used to kill suspected terrorists in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but at some point they will be flying overhead here. News organizations are looking at them to replace helicopters. The WOSU drone will be soon coming. And Ohio wants to use them for a variety of civilian purposes, from looking for lost kids to monitoring corn and soybeans. Mark Niquette, you wrote about this. How long before they are over our heads, would you guess?
Well, they're already starting to be incorporated, particularly with police departments or first responders, to be used to do things that are either too dangerous or difficult for humans to do. But Congress has told the FAA to essentially come up with the rules and procedures to incorporate these sort of non-military drones into the U.S. airspace by the end of 2015. And Ohio is actually looking to really capitalize on this. They see a pretty dramatic growth industry in being able to make these drones or supply the software or the components that are needed for it. And I think the collaboration of industry and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, particularly in Dayton, could be a real growth for the state.
But I think there's some serious privacy issues. I mean, we've seen it a little bit. I mean, Google Maps and some of the sky cameras are interesting, but you have too many cameras on the streets or floating around. I don't know that everybody wants people peering in the windows.
Too late, Terry.
What?
I know, if we didn't have all those cameras, we would never have seen that meteor that hit Russia. That was great stuff.
But there's people that expect some privacy in their home, in their car.
That's over.
Well,
that's over.
But I think,
it's done. Everybody has a camera. They will turn that phone on to a camera at any time, any place, anywhere, whatever you're doing. That's over.
Well, but that's self-inflicted, but you ought to have a right in your home. Remember, a home is your castle, from people peering in your windows and having these little drones floating around.
But they can't peer in your windows. They can't look in your bathroom.
Well, Mark, can they hover them? Is that the real concern? And there have to be rules, say you can't hover over somebody's yard without a search warrant, perhaps?
That is a concern, particularly with police. And this will be a debate. There's now bills that have been introduced in at least 18 states that would seek to either delay the implementation of these drones till we get some of these rules worked out, or place specific rules on their use.
They won't allow you to do thermal assessments to see if people growing weed in their basement.
They'll shoot through the window, see if they're smoking it. Forget about that. I mean, the courts have ruled so far that the airspace above your property does not belong to you. It's not your personal property.
But Google Camera can get up there and look.
Sure.
But it's not real time. And they do blur out one of my neighbors was out watering her flowers when the car went by, and she's blurred out on her Google Street View.
But I would guess on Google you could find other ones where they didn't get it blurred out.
Yeah, there's a famous case where a lady caught her husband going into somebody's house on Google. I think I subscribe to your notion that we need privacy. I do. I support it. But the technology is here now, and there's a camera on every corner. We have to find a way to give us that privacy legally, but we also have to adapt to the reality that these things are already here.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots, and Sam Gresham, we'll start with you.
I think the Civil War is a great thing for the Republican Party. It will be a cleaning thing, and we'll find a party that is more supportive of women, It will be more supportive of brown and black people. So I look forward to the continual carnage.
In Lima, there was a former state representative who didn't this week get the chance to see the state of the state because he's in prison in Lima. There's another state representative ready to go to prison, and I think there's going to be one or two or more that might go there because there's still 5 FBI agents sending a message to the state legislature and lobbyists, no more business as usual. But I think there might be one or two more who will get some jail time as the 2 ready to serve will be suffering from.
Daryl.
A couple times before in the show, I've mentioned Blake Haxton, the Upper Arlington rower who lost both his legs. Going to be 4 years ago next month. I got an opportunity to hear Blake speak on New Year's Day, and it was special. Just this past week, the governor appointed him to the Rehabilitative Services Commission of Ohio. Great appointment, if I may step away from my unbiased judgment. And by the way, he is going to graduate from Ohio State this year. 4 years.
Great for him. Mark.
One of the governor's budget proposals that sort of got overshadowed by Medicaid and taxes and school funding is the plan to allow the Ohio Turnpike Commission to extend its borrowing capacity to pay for state transportation projects. And there was sort of a collective sigh of relief when the governor announced that he wasn't going to lease the turnpike but do this bonding proposal. But we're going to see now some of the nitty-gritty of the details emerge, I think, starting next week as to what the legislature is actually going to do and what's actually going to be put into the statute that's passed to allow this.
All right. Oscar night, Sunday night. Oddly enough, 2 political-based thrillers are up for Best Picture, Lincoln and Argo, neck and neck between those 2 films from what we understand. I'm picking Lincoln. My son, a movie buff, is picking Argo. We'll see who wins on Sunday night. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Please check us out online. Continue the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. And you can see video from each episode at wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel here at WOSU at COSIDE, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.